Well, during the upcoming Australia Day holiday, Port Macquarie will, as in previous years, face a total alcohol ban on its beaches and reserves as police and council aim to curb antisocial behaviour. Now, the move to ban alcohol does have its critics, myself included, but council insists the measure has already proven its worth. Christine Bannister is the Crime Prevention Officer with Port Macquarie Hastings Council, and she joins me in the Time to Talk studio tonight. G'day, Christine.
Hello, Tim.
So the alcohol ban has been in place for a few years now, and as I understand it, it was followed a few fairly ugly incidents at Town and Shelley beaches.
That's right.
Explain to us the objective of banning alcohol from all our beaches and reserves for this 36-hour period.
Okay. This is actually the second year, Tim, that we're trialling it. It came about, and it was a fairly, a bit of a lengthy process that took to actually come to this decision. And it's not something that we kind of undertook lightly. Applying a prohibition is a fairly, you've actually got to be able to implement it and enforce it and follow it through as well. But what we had in the Hastings, and kind of, I guess 2009 was the first significant year, was increasing numbers of antisocial behaviour, including physical assaults, which were alcohol-fuelled. 2009 was primarily Shelley and Flynn's Beach, and to a lesser extent Rainbow Beach in Bonny Hills. In 2010, that number really escalated and was primarily at Town Beach and Rainbow Beach in Bonny Hills, which led to a real community outcry around what are we going to do around, I guess, the fear that was generating particularly on those beaches on Australia Day.
Can you describe the type of behaviour for those people that aren't aware of it, maybe are new to town? What sort of behaviour were we seeing on the beaches?
What we're looking at was groups of individuals of all ages, but predominantly males and predominantly males in the 18 to 35 age group, who were visibly intoxicated, who had claimed chunks of the space and who were, I guess, acting in a yobbish kind of way in those spaces, so much so that people felt fearful and packed up and left the space. Particularly young families were saying, we were intimidated, we left the space. So,
absolutely. And I remember around that time, families just would almost refuse. It was that ugly side of Australia Day that we all know too well, the
right.
painted face, the yobbish behaviour, as you just described.
Definitely, yeah.
So clearly we had a problem with certain individuals disturbing the peace, and I prefer not to call it antisocial behaviour. We need to call it for what it is. It was criminal behaviour, because when you're disturbing the peace, when you're intimidating people, that's criminal behaviour. So we've got to call it what it is. Isn't a blanket ban on alcohol, though, isn't that just a lazy response to this problem? Yeah,
look, it could be seen to be that way, but I guess it's about saying, well, what authority do we have and what can we do to alleviate that? We're talking about a day that it's about celebrating what is actually Australian, and some people would say being able to have a beer on Australia Day is quintessentially Australian as well, and that may be the case. What we had to do was something fairly drastic. What we had done was implemented, we'd had years in the past where we had night rider services. We'd work with licensed premises around the sorts of takeaways that they had as well. But it wasn't people leaving the licensed premises, it was actually people taking their own alcohol and large quantities of it to beaches and reserves, but predominantly beaches. So,
do you think it's a fair assertion, though, that a total ban on alcohol on beaches and reserves across the whole Port Macquarie region, that is punishing everybody for the behaviour of the minority?
Yep, you've got a point. It is, certainly it is. What we wanted to be mindful was we could have actually implemented certain restrictions in certain areas, but what we know from past experience is it just displaces the problem. As soon as we put a ban in at, say, Town Beach and Rainbow Beach, we'd move the problem on potentially to Flynn's Beach or the Town Green, and we didn't want to move the problem on. We wanted to be able to deal with it there and then.
Do you think it's fair for me to make the comparison that this is similar to closing the Pacific Highway at Christmas time because there were so many accidents on the road during that period?
It could, you could look at it that. I also have an issue with prohibition. I'm not a one for implementing a lot of rules, and I know council have the same perspective, as do the police, because it means then you're putting in laws in place and taking responsibility where it probably is better to put the responsibility back onto the community. I guess what we're at was a real impasse where we said, right, this is really disturbing. We've got a group of people who are really, really concerned. When we advertised and went out and put it to council that we're going to actually implement the ban on Australia Day, nobody actually, the only people contacted were people actually who said, fantastic, about time. So we had no one actually ringing in or writing in who said, really I've got some concerns or who actually lodged any objections to that.
Well, that raises another question that I was very keen to ask. What consultation was there with the community? Because you're saying there that you didn't receive the complaints.
Yep.
The first time I heard about this was a couple of years ago when I was driving next to Town Beach, and there was a sign there saying total alcohol ban. It surprised me and offended me, if I'm going to be honest, that I wasn't asked if this should be a part of our community's culture.
I guess that would have been last year, because that was the first year we implemented it. What we do with all council resolutions and all council decisions is it goes to a council meeting. We had some advertising in the newspaper, some fairly significant advertising, because I remember at the time I'm 5'3" and everyone else, Peter Besling and all the police, were 6'4" and above. So
they're big boys.
Yes, I looked very tiny compared to them. So we had quite an extensive media campaign around the fact that we were looking at implementing this.
The question that springs to mind for me is, if there is such a problem with groups of individuals and individuals flouting the rules and spoiling the enjoyment on Australia Day, where are the police in all this? Because to me, on the surface of it, perhaps, it seems like the police are shirking their responsibility. If there are people causing trouble, isn't it the job of the police to go and target those individuals? And they do have the powers in place,
Definitely.
I know that.
Yep,
so
definitely.
why aren't they moving them on?
And they do, they have an embargo on leave, and I won't speak too much for the police, but I do know they have an embargo on leave for Australia Day and other festive dates as well. So I know that they were out in force the year before last, which was the most significant year. That was the year where we had...
It was a real problem.
Definitely, 14 assaults. That was the same day that we had a fatal accident on the highway, which pulled out a lot of resources. So they do have a full complement, and actually more police than usual come up over the festive season. We have police come from other local.
So they're well resourced, but again, it still seems, I appreciate that day sounds like it was extremely difficult. What I would have liked to have seen is for them to go away, work with council and go, okay, well, what was the problem there? But they've thrown a blanket, let's solve it by just banning alcohol. That is extreme, and it really punishes everyone. And you know what the irony is, Christine, from where I sit? You've served victory to these thugs on a plate, because every year when this ban is in place, the ban that they were the root of, I mean, it just seems like you're handing victory to thugs and a minority.
I'm not sure I agree with you. It's not a blanket permanent ban. This is a ban that we implemented last year, and we've decided to implement again this year. Last year was highly successful. We had a 66% reduction in alcohol-related crime, and we also had a similar reduction, a 33% reduction in crime, a 66% reduction in assaults on Australia Day alone. So that in and of itself was fairly significant. That doesn't mean that that's all directly related to the ban, but it was significant enough that we thought, well, we're going to look at again implementing the ban. We had no request to consider repealing it, so we thought, well, given that, we'll proceed again, promote that we're looking at doing that, and then we put that towards council again, and again it went through uncontested from the community.
I'm not surprised you get good results from that, but my question is, at what expense? You know, civil liberties are... I mean,
definitely.
look, I'll just spell it out for you. My problem is that on Australia Day, it's one of those rare days where you can get to the beach with your family, pack a chicken sandwich and have a small bottle of red, and now I can't do that in Port Macquarie. And this is a community that, you know, I've lived in for a long time. I love and look forward to that one public holiday a year in summer so that I can go down and spend the time with my family. And now, because of a few thugs...
Yes, and you're right. And unfortunately, look, I'm the same. I also enjoyed Australia Day last year on the beach. I actually went down to one of the beaches which had been problematic the year before, and I felt a bit apprehensive about doing that. I also like a glass of wine, like a lot of people. And it meant that I had to forego that. I guess the flip side of that is that it was a safer experience for people. I guess it is, and it is often, not often, but I guess it does occur at times when 5% or a small minority of people unfortunately ruin it for a majority of people. And I guess in this case we're looking at the greater good. Is
this a permanent thing? Is it going to happen every year, do you think? Or at some stage will you look at revising this?
No, I think that each year we've got to look at what happens, and it's not something that we look at in isolation. So what we look at is doing is a whole range of measures, not just on Australia Day, but looking at, I guess, the whole festive season across the board. So we look at things like we have the Night Rider project, we've got the secure taxi rank. We work fairly closely with and have a very proactive liquor record, and we work with other local agencies as well to say, what else can we do? It's not a single answer to a problem it's fairly complex. So
you're coming at it from a number of angles, but will it be enforced in 2013, do you believe?
I don't know. It depends on what comes out of this year. So we don't know for certain that it was the ban last year that reduced the assaults. You know, things go through cycles and things change. Hopefully there's just been a swing around and people said, look, we probably have got a little bit out of control. Yeah.
Well, look, love it or loathe it. The alcohol ban comes into force on all Port Macquarie beaches and reserves from, I believe, is it 9 p.m. on January 25?
That's right.
And when does it expire?
It finishes on 9 a.m. the 27th. So we have a standard prohibition of a night from 9 p.m. till 9 a.m. on beaches and reserves.
Right.
And this just fills in that missing 12 hours during the day on Australia Day. So it does, effectively, it makes it a 36-hour.
Okay,
ban.
so just so that there is no confusion, because we all have to follow the rule. From that 9 p.m. on the 25th, there's just basically no alcohol. Police can confiscate it, move you on if you haven't.
That's right.
And
tip it out. They will tip it out there on the spot. So.
Right. And can you get into trouble? Will you be fined or?
The fine isn't the most effective means. So yes, you can be fined. Yes, but that's why we actually sought the tip out powers, because you don't want to move the problem on. If you find someone, then they just take their alcohol and move to the next area, and really not targeting people who are sitting there. You're not going to come to anyone's attention if you're just sitting there quietly. What we're trying to do is look at the yobbos and to do something fairly quickly. That being said, I'm not saying go and have a quiet drink by any means as well.
Okay.
It is about, I guess, there's a community working together to support the prohibition.
So if I've got my brandy in my thermos,
you don't
support that at all, do you, Christine?
If you're staggering along, I think you might come to somebody's attention.
All right, Christine. Look, thanks so much for coming in and explaining it, and answering those tougher questions that some people have wanted to ask for the past few years.
They're good questions.
Yeah. I'm interested to know what you think at home. Give us a call tonight on 6585 3456. You're listening to the Time to Talk program.